Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Jenny Halpin, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Warrant Officer Cherie Fayers. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Now may I ask you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Charles John Dullea. Charles Dullea, known as Charlie, was born on the 6th of April 1882 in Udunda, South Australia. He was the second eldest son of Daniel and Mary Dullea, who shortly after Charlie's birth took their family to the South Australian town of Saddleworth. He grew up in a large family. His father worked on the railways and died when Charlie was a small boy. His mother was a keen gardener and a faithful member of the Catholic Church. Charlie was educated at Saddleworth Public School and grew into what was described as an exceptionally fine physique. After completing his education, he took up farming at Butte, near Snowtown in South Australia. Charlie Dullea attempted to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force a number of times after the outbreak of war in August 1914, but was not accepted for active service until March 1916. By that time, 3 of his brothers, Michael, Thomas, and Ted, were in Egypt training in the desert. Charlie began training in Australia before leaving for active service in June 1916 on board the troop ship Baramba. Unlike his brothers, Private Charlie Dullea was first sent to England and completed his training on the Salisbury Plain. Although he had left Australia with reinforcements to the 10th Battalion, he was soon transferred to the 43rd Battalion, another South Australian formation. After completing his training, he was sent to join his battalion on the battlefields of the Western Front in France in November 1916. Private Dullea arrived in France just as one of the coldest winters on record was setting in. Within a few weeks, he fell ill with mumps and was taken to hospital at Atip to recover. He returned to his battalion and remained with it through the winter and into the spring of 1917. The 43rd Battalion's first major action came at the Battle of Messines in June 1917, and though it largely remained in reserve, the battalion stayed near Messines in the weeks that followed, guarding the newly captured ground. On the 30th of July, the 43rd Battalion began once again to prepare for another operation, which would also take place along the ridge behind Messines. At 3:40 a.m. on the 31st of July, the 43rd Battalion launched an attack on operations near the River Douve, capturing all of its objectives. During the operation, 35 men of the 43rd Battalion were killed, and another 180 were wounded or missing. Private Charles Dullea was one of the wounded, carried from the battlefield with a gunshot wound to the head. He was taken to the 9th Field Ambulance and from there to the 2nd Australian Casualty Clearing Station. By the time he arrived, he was too unwell to move further, and he died of his wounds on the 1st of August 1917. Private Charles Dullea was buried in the nearby Toisarbe Cemetery at Stanwerk, where he lies today under the epitaph, "Beloved son of Mary and the late Daniel Dullea of Saddleworth." He is not the only Dullea with that epitaph on the Western Front. His older brother Michael was killed at Pozières in 1916, and his youngest brother Ted was killed at Norroy in April 1917. Only Thomas returned to Saddleworth. The names of the 3 Dullea brothers who lost their lives in the war are listed on my roll of honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died serving in the First World War. A photograph of Private Charles John Dullea's headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Charles John Dullea, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope for a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.